face, if you're on, let me know that the volume's working by giving me a fist pump or a thumbs up on the comments. I got shook up a couple weeks ago when I was actually recording and there was no volume and I didn't know it. So because I have my phone flipped backwards, I want to make sure this thing is working. Somebody give me a thumbs up, let me know the volume's working, and we do this. All right, what's up? Welcome to Sunday Sermon. Week 12, baby. Week 12. All right. Let's do this. Short and sweet. I always say that. Man, my tradition is to always have my Dallas Cowboys mug right here with a delicious cup of coffee. And I don't know if there's a worse feeling than waking up and forgetting that you have no coffee. So, fortunately, not that I need the boost, but I need something delicious in the morning. These are pretty delicious, pretty tasty. All right, so I'm going on faith that the volume's working. Just no one gave me a thumbs up yet. And here we go. All right, so I changed the scenery a little bit. Got my Christmas tree behind me because we are in the Christmas season. And, of course, you'll always see me rocking some Syracuse gear. Got my favorite little Syracuse ornament right here. All right, so let's get this going, guys. Today we're talking about getting out of survival mode and into a thriving mode, right? So I'll start off with the quote. The quote that really impacted me recently was a quote that says, "The habits you create, or the habits that you created to survive, will no longer serve you when it's time to thrive." Get out of survival mode. New habits, new life. So what does that mean? Sorry about that. All right. So what does survival mode look like? I learned this lesson the other day when I had to examine my behaviors. Last Saturday, not yesterday, the Saturday before that, I was at the gym and I was working out. And I stepped off the treadmill. Sorry, I gotta make sure I stepped off the treadmill and, like I usually do, kind of sidestepping it, took a sip of water. I was watching a Syracuse game. They were playing the number 2 team in the country, Kansas, so my eyes were like dialed in. Critical time, I was out of water. I rushed really quickly to go fill my water bottle, and when I came back to the treadmill, zoomed into the game, I had completely overlooked the fact that the treadmill was still at 7.0 speed going. And without even looking down at all, I stepped onto the treadmill and just absolutely biffed it hard. And that was just hilarious in itself, not for me, but for the people that were watching. So that's people kind of come towards me, and they were asking me if I needed help and so on and so forth. I'm just kind of laying there, nursing my injuries, if you will. I had scabs all over. I've had scabs all over my legs. I've got just gashes and everything. It was pretty bad. And it wasn't so much that was the problem. I was able to run a few miles after that, but what happened after that really is kind of the part that I wanted to highlight. It is not in my nature to, when something like that happens, to nurse the injury, if you will. Like I don't do that. I just kind of like, yeah, whatever, just an injury. I saw blood obviously on my kneecap. And because it wasn't dripping, I didn't feel like I needed to do anything, and so I just kept running. And a few days later, as the scabs began to form, I came home, and around Wednesday night it was, 4 or 5 days later, I came home, and my knee just swelled into a bubble. And I got to the doctor the next day, and the doctor says that I have an infection. My knee ended up getting an infection, so he told me I had cellulitis in my knee. It still hurts. I can't really walk that well right now, and that's been since Wednesday. And so it's still swollen, it still hurts. And I started thinking about some things, especially when I read that quote. The habits you created to survive will no longer serve you when it's time to thrive. Get out of survival mode. New habits, new life. And what I started examining in myself was I have a lot of those survival and poverty behaviors. See, when my son gets hurt, something happens to him, it's pretty natural for me to run over to him, to show him some care, to show him some compassion, to tend to the injury, if you will, and just to be there for him as a comforter. And I started realizing I didn't grow up that way. I remember more often than not, every single time I fell, I didn't have family or a lot of people that are adults, and my dad particularly not, rushing over to tend to me, especially with compassion and care and love, you know. It was just, as a kid, I mean, even as adults, when we fall down and hurt ourselves, we still look for somebody at least. I mean, we don't look for it, but it's nice to have somebody that says, oh my gosh, are you okay? You okay? Like, yeah, I mean, at least 12 people came up to me and asked me if I was okay, you know. Yet, like I said, when my son falls, it's pretty normal, you know, to kind of tend to it. However, when I grew up, it was usually, and sometimes in Spanish, you would hear something like, por pendejo. Which, I guess, I don't know how you translate it, but I could say it's kind of like saying, well, that's what you get for being an idiot. And so think about like those times when you get hurt. Think about the mind of a child when they hurt themselves, and rather than getting comfort, which is what they're really seeking and wanting. You have family that says, that's what you get for being an idiot. That's what you get. I told you not to play over there. And actually, sometimes when we would get hurt, they'd come over and they'd say, didn't I tell you not to be playing over there? And boom. So on top of the actual injury that you just sustained, you get another injury across the head. And so when I thought about that, it's like, man, there's a lot of areas in my life where I don't really tend to them. There's kind of survival behaviors. There's where I'm not actually thriving. Right? I still have like this poverty mindset around things. I don't take care of myself. Well, I'm like, I look at the scratch and say, it's no big deal. I can still run. I don't tend to it, but I wasn't trained that way. I was trained into this survival mindset. You just kind of do what you do and keep on going. Well, then I started looking at what does survival mode look at as we transition into adulthood, right? What does survival mode look like as we transition into adulthood? I remember how the poverty mindset really fed into survival mode. Here's what survival mode looks like. Okay, I'm just going to paint a picture really quick because I'm not going to do this long video today. Survival mode. Here's some of the characteristics to know if you're in survival mode. I work with, I do some clinical work here in Salem. I work with a lot of people who have issues with addiction and drug use, if you will. It's not just addiction. Sometimes it's just drug use. And when I think about survival mode, it comes in different forms. Survival mode for a lot of people is if you have a network of people that you can borrow money from at any given time of the week. You struggle financially, And you've always got this group of people here that you can borrow money from. You've always got this group of people over here that you can borrow a ride from or get a ride from. If you've just got this network of people that you can always access as resources from, it's probably happened because we've arrived at this place where this level of life where we're complacent. And it's not just about poverty. See, when I think about complacency, when I think about people being in survival mode, one of the things that I think about is I think about New Year's resolutions. I won't talk too much about that because I did a couple weeks ago, but think about New Year's resolutions. New Year's resolutions are proof that we desire to change something. I mean, if people were that satisfied, this whole New Year's resolutions thing would have never taken off. People would have just been in a habit of constantly changing something that they disapprove of. People would be assessing themselves and saying, there's this big area here that's I did for 365 days, and starting January 1st, I'm going to give it another go to eliminate that one thing that I was doing for 365 days that I didn't like. See, what that is that's people are just living. People are just becoming complacent with behavior. So again, not particularly attached to poverty, but complacency is a key characteristic of survival mode. Have we become complacent in the things that we do, in the way that we eat, in our attitude? Has our attitude at work or our place of business just become complacent? And we do it and we do it and we do it, and then come January 1st, we try to undo it, and we all know that it doesn't last very long. The other thing that's happening with survival mode in our life when we're just surviving, just trying to get by, is you have to remember we become what we practice doing. So the mindset that feeds developing complacency, pretty soon you just become a master at it. Pretty soon it's just the way you live. You're too good at it. And rather than being survival mode, see, today we're talking about survival mode, being surviving versus thriving. But man, I have this belief that once you're in survival mode for too long, pretty soon you transition out of survival mode into this danger zone that we call the lifestyle. It just becomes a way of life. And once it becomes a way of life, you just really don't think twice about it. And that's dangerous. That's dangerous. So, survival mode. Think about the characteristics that you possess in your life that you could really assess as saying, my gosh, I'm in survival mode right now. I'm just in the struggle. And then ask yourself, has the struggle ceased where now my life it's just become a lifestyle? Constantly surviving, just trying to get by, just trying to figure things out, always trying something. And remember, when we're always that trying something and trying to get out of the hole of complacency, out of survival, we're obviously dissatisfied. So, survival mode. So what's thriving mode? Right? Everybody wants it. That's that January 1st kind of thing. What's thriving mode? So when I talked about New Year's resolutions being proof that we desire to change something, everything starts with new habits. Right? So let me read that second part of the quote again. The habits that you created to survive will no longer serve you when it's time to thrive. Get out of survival mode. New habits, new life. So, there's a quote that says, even if you finish last, you're still lapping everyone on the couch. Okay? So, most people aren't willing to start for fear of coming last. Most people aren't willing to start because they're afraid of failing. Guys, anytime we're pursuing something different or something we're wanting to experience success in something different and you're not doing it, we're already failing. See, the victory is in trying something different. The victory is trying to figure out what new habits, when you think about the habits that you have that have worked yourself into a life of survival, oftentimes those are key indicators of new habits that we need to develop in order to create a new life. in order to thrive. See, because part of survival is the way we just talk ourselves into the lifestyle that we live. When I think about the best example of what it looks like to be stuck in survival mode, to be stuck in complacency, to just become a master of complacency, I think about the example in the scripture about the religious leaders, right? You had these religious leaders that for years had been telling people about the Messiah. That was kind of their job. They knew every single scripture. They knew they had all of the language. Everybody went to them for knowledge and wisdom about what was about the Savior to come, and this and this and this. And they had all this information. Yet by the time the Messiah actually arrived, these cats didn't even recognize him. They got so stuck in just languaging themselves into the stories, into the version, and just ruling over people and the network and the connections that they had, that by the time the thing that they talked about actually happened, they didn't recognize it. They got complacent. They got complacent. And we could go on and on about how they actually killed the dude also, but we won't. See, that's the most dangerous part of being in survival mode. Is oftentimes when it happens, when you're dialed in, locked into complacency and mastery, you're the last one to even know. You're just into life. I talk about a lot if you have kids. That's a problem. You know, I got sick and tired growing up of hearing family always justify their behavior towards me and my siblings or my cousins, justifying it because that's the way we grew up. Oh, so we're supposed to naturally train ourselves into abusing the next generation. Most of my family was always in survival mode, struggling to pay bills. When we went to the gas station, I don't remember going to gas stations with a lot of family members and them saying, just fill her up. $8 here, $12 there, just enough to get to where we need to go. And I remember always trying to figure out where we were going to borrow money from, where we were going to eat. Just absolute survival mode. Trying to get from one day to the next, even though the next day had little to no purpose, just like the day before. That's the problem with survival mode. The desire to get to the next place that also has high levels of dissatisfaction. We owe it to ourselves to want to transition into thriving mode, where it benefits who we are as a person. It changes the direction that we're headed. And I think even more importantly, it's the message that we send to our kids, to young people that you influence. It's hard to engage young people into a thriving mindset when we're surviving. So that's the question I would consider you asking today when you assess different areas of your life. Are you just surviving, or are you thriving? All it takes is a plan. When's the last time you sat down for 30 minutes and wrote out a life that you would love to be living, right? And so I recommend a counselor. I recommend coaching. That's what I do. That's what I help people do. It's a year of, as you transition into 2018, I'm not saying wait till January 1st, but I'm saying 2018 is just around the corner. And you will attempt to create a New Year's resolution to undo some behavior that you're dissatisfied with. To start today. Okay? So I pray for you guys. I pray God's blessing in your life today. Really this comes down into an individual decision, an individual mindset. It's got nothing to do with the world out there. It's got nothing to do with people. Let me just share this quick story real quick. I was at a wrestling match yesterday, and so this little cat named Nick Capatillo, he's like family. And he was intending to win the championship. He was intending to win first place at this huge tournament, tons of schools there, out at Westview High School. And he had already wrapped up a couple of matches. By the time my son and I got there, he was already headed to the finals. And as I was standing next to him, I had a chance to ask him. I said, "Hey, what's going on for you emotionally? What type of emotions are you experiencing when you're about to start your match?" He had one of the most incredible answers that I could have even imagined a kid saying. He says, "Well," he said, I just basically what he said. He said, I just go in there and I just give it everything I got. I know what I can do, and so it's just about my skills. I've got nothing to lose." And why I thought that was fascinating, because it reminded me of something that I just mentioned, which is I would have expected a younger cat like that to mention something about nerves and the other person's abilities, the other person's skills, just anything about something external. But the way that his mentality going into this match was, I know what I can do. I've observed my skills, and as long as I engage in everything that I possess, I've got nothing to lose. Isn't that the truth for our life? So much of what discourages us, so much of what breaks us down, so much of what freaks us out is out there. Completely forgetting that what it takes to be successful in this life is here and here. And we've got nothing to lose. Have a blessed day, guys.